Howdy and welcome back everybody to another wonderful evening and another call with Brian Schaefer, and we're here this evening with another wonderful topic to learn and listen about. And if you haven't heard of Brian before, Brian's an author, an inspirational speaker, a wonderful holistic natural therapist and philosopher. He's the author of the book The Nature of Life: How to Remain at Peace in the Modern World. If you haven't got your copy yet, we'll pop a link in the chat box and obviously in the video description so you can take a look at that. But tonight's information, what we'll be sharing, will be a little bit different to some of it's the foundation of it's in the book, but in terms of the way it's presented, this is something relatively new to many people that haven't heard it presented here. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Schaefer cycle is what Brian's come up with to present it as, and essentially it's about detoxifying and energizing a protocol for a detoxifying and energizing protocol for your body and life. So we see out there, especially in the holistic health space, people talking very much about things like detoxing and cleansing and fasting and so on and so forth. But as frontline practitioners like myself and Brian and so forth find, we're often putting people back together from complete misinformation that people take on, where they'll either jump into a fast far too soon without energizing first, or they don't do the necessary cleansing or whatever it might be. So Brian's going to bring it all together for us tonight, put it in some sort of logical sequence and order, the internal and the external factors that are associated with it all, and essentially reaffirm to us that it's actually all an individual process, and there's no set answers or set protocol that suits every single being. So I think I covered that as best as I could, and just muting Joy there. And over to you, Brian. Wonderful to see you again, and thanks everyone else for being here too.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a rather intense fortnight, if not the last month, just moving house. It's not everybody's favourite chore, certainly not mine. So tonight I'm going to introduce what I call the Schaefer method. I know, and I fully appreciate that it sounds rather corny, but I couldn't come up with a better name, so I decided to call it the Schaefer cycle, in line with the Krebs cycle. And those of you that know anything about biochemistry, the Krebs cycle is to do with the energy and the ATP and how the energy functions within the cells. And so that's on one level of function. So I'm going to make the Schaefer cycle another level of function, which is the overall organism and the overall organism's experience within the external world and life as well. So this is going to bring together everything that I've been putting together in my own mind over the last 35 years or more. And it's where I find nearly everybody I've spoken to is missing the point somewhere. And this is, just to make it very clear, this is not going to be a total explanation of everything that I can possibly share with people in clinic or in an event. It's just introducing it just so people have the opportunity to broaden their hearts and minds on this topic, because so many people, I find, especially practitioners, think they already know and understand a lot about health. And the main aspect of health that most people are needing to deal with is the detoxification process. And I was talking to a handyman today, and he said he spends most of his time fixing other people's fuck-ups. And I laughed and I thought, well, that's what I do as well, And I know everybody's doing the best they can with what they've got, but I'm offering this just purely as it's a proposal of a theory. It's by no means refined or anything like that. It's just something I've been putting together for the last, I think it's only probably the last year that I've actually been sharing this, because I share the principles of this in clinic on an individual basis. But as everybody who knows me appreciates, I get extremely bored extremely quickly repeating myself. And the idea of these Zoom calls is I can put all the information out there for free, as much as I possibly can in the time I have these in these Zoom calls. And I don't always have a lot of time to prepare for them. So a lot of them are just completely off the cuff. And I wanted to introduce this to the whole field, right? And I don't pretend to know everything about any particular topic. There's a lot of people who will know a lot more about any particular field than what I do. It's just like the way my brain works is I know a little bit about everything. And I know a lot of things in great depth, but still not to the depth that somebody who's been doing it in that particular area of specialty in their whole life would know. But I've usually picked a lot of people's brains who have done that, got the essence of it and put it together with the essence of everybody else's brains I've picked and everything else I've studied. And the area that I find the biggest issue that people have in their life is being able to get over addictions and health issues using detoxification techniques. And the main thing that I focus on, as everybody who knows me, is purification, right? And the purification process is the entire Schaefer cycle at the end of a 2-year cycle. So what I've done is I've broken it down into 10 steps or 10 stages. You go through those 10 stages 7 times, like 7 cycles in a 2-year period. This may sound complicated, but it is complex, right? And the reason why it's complex is most people have never done a proper cleanse or a proper detox in their life. You know, a lot of people have done full-on cleansing, but as you will see, they didn't do it in the right order. Therefore, the cleanse wasn't as effective as what it could have been. And I want to put it all into context and make it into a streamlined process so people can actually look at it and determine to a large extent where they're at within it and potentially what they need to do. But I like helping people when they get through to like the 3rd or 4th cycle, right? But if I give enough information to people if they've got the right intelligences and the right intent, they might be able to go through the first 2 or 3 cycles by themselves and in preparation for what I've got to offer them, right? But as you'll see, there is no standard answer to any of this topic. And a lot of people get very pissed off with me I can't give a simple answer to these things, right? And if you look at the real reason as to why people want simple answers is because they're too busy in the world, on the hamster wheel and the merry-go-round, to be able to stop and think about it and process all the information and then adapt it to their own individual needs. And the other factor is that a lot of people are just trying to do it on the cheap, right? People ring me up and say, "Oh, Brian, can you share with me your detox program?" And like the answer is no, right? Because as you're about to find out, it's like walking a razor's edge, and I can't just generalize, right? The whole problem with, they call them general practitioners, GPs, for a reason. They generalize. I'm the extreme opposite of that. My brother and I talk about being IPs, individual practitioners. Everything's got to be individualized, right? So the more we know the factors of where to individualize, the better off we'll be. And the most important factor in a person's overall capacity to heal and grow is to know how to put them through the whole purification process, right? Part of the purification process is to purify the internal and external, right? Most people just identify the detoxification as an internal thing, a body thing, but I'm talking about the overall purification of mind, body, soul, spirit, and the external world as well. So again, being holistic, I talk about the whole picture. And I want to explain to you where I feel that most people are missing the point, right? I'm not going to try and get through all of it tonight as much as I'd like to. But I'll try and keep it to the hour and a half. And if there's time at the end, I'll do a Q&A. But like I just said in the email, this is not going to be a DIY approach to this whole procedure, right? It is far too many factors. I'm just going to introduce you to as many of the main factors as possible, so you can make more of a conscious choice about who you listen to when you're coming to the different stages and the different cycles. You might listen to a herbalist for, the second stage of the third cycle or something like that. You might listen to a homeopath for the first stage of the 10th cycle, something like that. So this is where you'll have an understanding of what it is that you need individually. And like, it takes away the whole pinata and pin the tail on the donkey approach. Yeah. And you'll see that there again, the degree to which it needs to be individualized can't be understated. Right? I'm forever, like I said, fixing other people's fuck ups, right? And I'll give examples of that as I go along. So if you can, if there's anything pressing, just write a chat to Mark. If it's relevant to what the topic I'm talking about, I'll stop and address it. Otherwise, we'll leave it to the Q&A. And if the Q&A is appropriate, we'll leave it on the end of the video. If not, well, then we'll just edit that bit off. Right? So I don't want this to become a consult. I've talked about this in events, and people have just tried to take over the whole event and ask me, exactly what products should they take at each stage of the process. It's like, I don't do that anymore. I don't accommodate that sort of thing. So, so if there's anything that you think I'm missing the point on as I go, if you want to, Mark, if you just jump in and tell me to elaborate on it if it's essential as well. So I'll just share the screen. So I did put together a PowerPoint covering as much as I could. So, all right. I'm still getting to know my way around Windows 10 and the PowerPoint, so it's also quite different. Alrighty, is that sharing there, Mark?
Sure is.
Yep, okay. I'm just going to turn my volume up here a bit as well. Okay. So like I said, I couldn't think of any better name other than Schaefer cycle. I probably will change that because, like I said, I try to remain as anonymous as I can, but just for the sake of this exercise, I'll call it that. But I mainly want to help everybody understand that it is a cycle, and I want everybody to associate it with the complexity of what the Krebs cycle is like, right? The Krebs cycle is it's quite complex on a cellular level. This is on an organism level, and that organism level in relation to its internal and external environment. And this is a protocol, and it's something that when you look at something that's got 10 stages in 7 cycles, so you do those 10 stages 7 times in 2 years, that's a protocol, right? And I'll explain the reason for all of that as we go along, right? So there's 6 components of information. I'll get through that, the what, when, how, where, why, and who of it. Obviously, if I talk about the whole picture, there's 36 points. I'll try and get through those 36 points tonight. But the internal, external, that would be a book. I probably will eventually write a book on this topic because it needs to be written, because there's so many people coming undone doing things the wrong way. And a lot of the people on the call have experienced that until they've met me as well. So there's 144 potential points relative to every topic. I can't possibly cover all that tonight, but I'm going to cover as much of it as I can. So the dynamics of disease, we'll get back to what I've covered in some of the other videos as well. What we're dealing with is the dis-ease, which is on any level of our being. And those of you that know this, all disease starts with a deficiency, which creates an excess, which then creates a deficit, which then creates an overload, which then creates a depletion, which then creates collapse and results in death. And along the way, people compensate, overcompensate, and self-destruct, right? So, and then the other one is decompensating, right? So a lot of people are dealing with the mental and emotional effects of the toxicities in their body and their life and their relationships. All right, so if you look at what Richard Grannon talks about in terms of all the narcissism and the toxicity of those relationships, that has a big bearing on people's physical health and mental health. And these are all the factors that we have to consider when we're addressing the overall approach to each individual. So the main thing with all the material I talk about is, again, we have to focus on what's missing. Right, so if you keep that as a common principle as we go through the whole thing, understanding that when I talk about excesses, we're focusing on what's missing. So this is where the more people know my material from the events or the book, the more they'll be able to help themselves and the people around them go through this process. So once I share all of this material, and I've written all the other books on the energies and properties of food, I want everybody to be able to go through this whole process for themselves, by themselves, anytime, anywhere, with anyone. Right, so if they're an Eskimo or Inuit person living in Alaska, then I'd like them to be able to know how to do a detox on their 3-year-old child, right? Without any input from anyone else. It's like, animals don't actually have to consult a practitioner. This is all awakening people's internal innate knowledge, right? So ideally, we should know how to do all this for ourselves, by ourselves. Again, it should be an innate thing, but this is where it's all been lost with sitting in front of TV, watching Sesame Street and Play School and Neighbours and all the rest of it. So we have to put back what's missing. And the more I introduce what I think is common sense back to the equation, then people have a different reference point in order to keep expanding their level of knowledge on it. Right. So,
sorry, Brian, can we just emphasize that people really pick that up, that we're putting back what's missing in the deficiency, deficits and depletions, and a lot of what's being shared out there is people trying to get rid of people's excesses.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks, Mark.
It's just super important in context of what's going to be shared tonight that people pick that up. So I just wanted to jump in there and
that's right. So as you know, like, I work holistically, because I focus on what's missing, then it usually is when you do that, it helps all the energy that's being freed up from the detoxification and the purification. It gives all that energy a direction and a purpose in which to channel itself. A lot of people come undone because they have all this energy going on during the process, and they've usually jumped ahead steps and stages and cycles, and they're doing things too soon. And all that energy is sort of released and has got nowhere to go. So it goes either into whatever chakra, and they just go crazy, or reflects in their overall attitude and behavior. So if you look at the extremes of what's going on, and this is what I deal with on a daily basis, is the extremes. What we're trying to do is prevent any harm, obviously, right? But even to have a person go through a detox and start having a massive outward going thoughts, simply because they've taken olive leaf extract too soon in the process, that's actually not beneficial for anybody, right? So we're trying to do all this completely effortlessly, right? We shouldn't have, in my way of thinking, we shouldn't have any symptoms at all as we go about this whole process, right? So if you focus on what's missing, you'll minimize the chance of missing the point. And if there is any sudden changes in a person's state of mind or their physical condition, where they get over-energized, then it gives a direction for that energy to go. And like, again, I like to share from my own personal experience, and this is part of the thing that inspires me to share what I'm sharing. This whole detoxification process is one of the last things I got my head around when I was 19, when I was 19 and 20, and I first got onto all the herbal detoxes and that sort of stuff. I didn't realize the extent to which I needed to withdraw all the activities I was doing. When I first got told by herbalists that I needed to take 6 weeks off to do a full detox, I said to them, I'm not prepared to do that. I laugh now at my foolishness, but like, I honestly said, no, I can't do that. I was in the middle of a motor racing season. I was in the middle of martial arts, doing training for a higher belt. And when he told me I needed to do 6 weeks off, I thought that was ludicrous. And then I thought it was even more crazy when, after a week of doing the detox, I felt more energized and I went out and trained harder and practiced harder for longer. And, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to share all this information to prevent people from making the same mistakes. I call it reinventing the wheel. We don't need to do that, right? If I can explain it simply enough and thoroughly enough, then people will just calm down and take things slowly and address the overall process for where they're at, for not for where they want to be or for where they think they're at, for where they're truly at, right? So the main thing is, as you go through this whole process, you have to always keep in mind the dominant force will always win, right? So we're trying to maintain the dominant force going in the direction of a person's soul elements, nature, soul, and food, for those who know the material, right? So we're helping the person regather all their energy and get it onto their path to fulfillment, their path to peace, right? So we're looking for any stray energies, and if any, we have to keep the dominant force in our favor, and that's what we're looking for, is that tipping point. We're trying to keep all the energies tipping in the direction of the positive or divine flow, and we're trying to nip things in the bud. Soon as there's a change, and this is where if people don't have the sensitivity to do this for themselves, they need to be guided, this or monitored. If somebody's aware of it and they can see a person starting to have a change in their thought processes or something, that's when they can alter the dose and dosage of what we're going to be talking about. Right, so it's all about doing things intelligently. And the other thing with this is you literally have to take it as it comes. And a lot of people will say, oh yes, but I'm doing a 6-week detox. Well, if you start a 6-week detox and you're living in the middle of the Philippines and a typhoon comes along, then that's going to interrupt your process, chances are, yeah? So you have to know how to ease off the detox, or whether you can just reduce it and still undergo like an external disaster or something like that, right? So this is where it's all about adaptation, all right? So the 12 aspects of being, so the idea is to keep evolving through the process, right? So even though a person's energy may be at some point of regression, the idea is to take a person from the lowest state and put them in the highest state effortlessly and in the shortest amount of time possible, without stressing, without any pressure. And the main thing is to minimize expectations as well. Right, so we can go from any stage of regression to any stage of evolution within any stage, right? So just keep this in mind as I go through it. Going through the first cycle, a person may go from the oblivion, the lowest state of regression, to, you know, midway through the evolution. Right? If it's all done right, you know, they can get really quick results depending on their constitution, which is what I'm going to be talking about, all the variables. Another person may have to do it 10 times to get to, you know, the enlightenment point within the enlightenment stage of the evolution, right? So everybody's different. It's never the same, right? And the people that I've taken this through will vouch for that. And they can never expect what's coming up, and they can never imagine the changes that happen either, and I'll explain to you why as well. Right, so the Schaefer cycle is being holistic. We address everything, so that's the whole holistic model that we work with. And because it is holistic, the more you understand this material, the more you'll be able to determine what pathways are being worked on as you go through each stage of each cycle. There's 6.5 quadrillion pathways. And it's not that hard to figure out what pathways a person's dealing with in terms of excesses and lack ofs. And the idea is, once you know the nature of life material and you've done the data meditation, is you'll be able to pick up on all this in the instant that it arises, right? So this is for those of you who know the material, we can consciously pick up on specific exact pathways as to what's happening, right? So the Schaefer cycle, what is it? It's an internally and externally purify and energize the whole being and the person's life, right? So whenever it's appropriate or needed. How? According to each individual. And we focus on what's missing, not the excesses, right? The excesses is secondary, right? The where, anywhere, literally anywhere, right? I've been doing this for like 35 years all around the world. And, you know, if I'm talking to, you know, a menopausal woman in Morocco who's got breast cancer, this is the whole inspiration out of this. Like when I was working in a clinic in India, if I had 10 women with breast cancer and they were 10 different religions from 10 different corners of the world, You know, I had a menopausal woman from Morocco who was Muslim, you know, a Christian girl from London, a Jewish lady from New York. I had to explain this whole process relative to their overall state and their lifestyle and everything. So that's how all this originated. And the reason why is to return to the natural state. And the who, we want to be able to do it on every individual creature or living form. Speaking of little creatures, I've got my little mascot here, right? And she's curled up in a ball. So this is how she spends the evening on my lap, right? So like when we have to put her through a detox, we have to know, you know, all the factors that I'm about to explain, right? So you can actually know and understand how to do this for your animals as well, right? So whether it's a racehorse or a dog that you use as a breeder, right? So this is not just the human. This is all creatures. It could be your aloe vera plant on your balcony, right? So you need to know and understand all the principles that are feeding into this, right? So these are the 10 stages of detoxification and energization, right? So the first thing is you have to energize a person. If there's 3 things that I talk about, it's being tired, sleepy, or lacking energy. If you're tired, if you feel like you've done a day's work and you've only just got out of bed, right, then that means you're not detoxifying, right? That's when I suggest people that they have to eat green till they poo green. Just start to detoxify. If you're sleepy, that means your routine's out, whether your eating routine, your drinking routine, or your exercise routine, there's something around your routine that's excess or deficient. And then if you're lacking energy, if you're walking along and you come to a flight of stairs and you feel like you haven't got the energy to just run up them, that means you're lacking raw food and you're not breathing properly and so on. This is all part of the 18 Seeds of Love, Light and Life within the book, if those of you that know it. Right, so the energizing is essential, right? If you think of the body as a machine, like as you know, I have a motor racing background, I have a very mechanical mind as well. There's a very mechanical and scientific approach to this. So those of you that know Tony Wright, you know, he's got an engineering background, so he's got an engineering approach to it. I have a similar approach, right? So if something doesn't have the energy, if you've got no fuel in your car or a flat battery, nothing will function correctly. So the number one thing is you have to energize the system first. The quickest and easiest way to energize the body, like I said, tired, sleepy, or lacking energy. The lacking energy is that you have to try to introduce more raw food, right? Again, if a person's in a really vata state within the Ayurvedic doshas and the things, right, too much raw food in winter is going to put them out of balance, right? So we'll get into the details of this later. Right, so the energizing, try to increase breathing and raw food, and fresh, raw, organic, whole foods, and be vegan. I'll get into the diet later. The next stage is elimination. Right, so this is, actually, I'll just go back to the first one. This is energizing. So we'll keep going with the external factor as well. So the energizing would be doing the feng shui of your house, or the Vastu Shastra, where you can go and stand at the entrance of each room of your house and each entrance of your house. And from each window, right, you look out and you look in the doors and look out the doors, and you look around and you think, now, what does this place need to be energized, right? So the way I explain that is, imagine if you're in your house, in a supernatural state, in nirvana, what would you need to do to your living room, right? You might stand at one entrance of your living room and say, I need a red vase there, I need a flower pot there, or I need to put a mirror there, or I need to take that away, or I need to shift that picture frame 5 degrees that way, right? It has to be almost exact without being paranoid or OCD, right? That's the way you energize your external world, right? Just, you might need a change of curtains, right? So, you know, we moved into this place and I thought they were going to paint some of the rooms, but they didn't. So we're going to try and paint the rooms just to get the energy and the frequency. Remember, the colors and all that sort of stuff is all part of the energy and the frequency of the place. So just become aware of the colors you're wearing, you know, the crystals or whatever it is that you're wearing, you know, the essential oils that you wear, everything to energize you, right? So the elimination, that is to eliminate anything that's not essential to your life, right? And remember, this is not compromising, contradicting, or denying what the opportunity of living heaven on earth in the now, right? So if it's not essential to living your pure life of supernatural being on earth in a human form, it has to go. Like I say, draw your sword on it, ching, right? So if it's not essential, it has to be eliminated, right? One of the masters said to me, one time I was out of my body on the edge of consciousness, and he showed me nirvana in relation to the human experience on earth. There was this massive crevasse, or this like bottomless pit between nirvana and heaven. And he calmly said to me, everything between here and heaven can and must go, right? So if it's not pure, if it's not true, it's going to go sooner or later. So usher all these things out the door. Just do it sooner rather than later. It's only going to prolong the suffering, right? So just eliminate anything and everyone out of your life that is not pure, right? It sounds narcissistic, but it's only prolonging the suffering, right? So eliminating internally, that's where you need to be doing doing a pee or having, urinating at least every hour, I reckon. Again, this has to be relative to your circumstances, but every hour is ideal. And you need to be doing at least 3 poos a day, right? So that's what we're working towards. And when your body's energized and you're hydrated and everything, your body will naturally eliminate. And this is all the pathways of elimination within your body, right? So as a practitioner, I'd be looking at how much you sweat, your breathing, because you eliminate most of the fat and everything like that out of your bodies through the breath. And then how many bowel motions a day, what your periods are like, everything, right? So all your pathways of elimination, they have to be functioning properly, right? And most of the time they don't function because they're not energized. Right, so the main thing with the elimination is that we're working towards having 3 bowel motions a day, right? Like I talk to people who only have 1 bowel motion every 10 days to 14 days. I mean, it's hard for a lot of people to imagine, right? And a lot of people think they're regular with their bowels, having 1 every 2 days. Oh, I don't have any problems with my bowels, And then I say, how many bowel motions you have? Oh, I have 1 every day or 2. It's like, right? So these are all the factors that feed into people having a disastrous experience when they start having a detox, right? And I'll get into all the things that cause people to have a healing crisis and worse when they go into a detox, right? But once we get through these 10 stages, it'll be obvious, right? So once you've eliminated everything that's not essential, the next stage is to purify. All right, so this means that if you're eliminating all the clothes out of your cupboard that aren't natural fibers, right, then you purify what's left. So you eliminate what's not essential, and whatever it is that is essential, you purify it, right? So if you have to have clothes, then make sure it's, like, if you can, organic cotton or hemp, right? So whatever you're left with, try to have it as pure as possible, right? So externally, right, like one of the reasons why I moved where I was is because I left the Gold Coast on Friday, whatever day it was, and they switched on the 5G towers on the Tuesday after that, right? So you have to live in a pure environment as much as you can. This is all relative. You'll understand how every step, every stage, and every cycle is relative to all the internal and external changes, right? So you can't just stick with one protocol and follow it. So once you're energized and eliminating and purified, then you can fast, right? But the main thing is you have to remember, one thing I didn't explain is you have to continue to energize as you eliminate and purify. So energizing is the whole way through. The idea is to keep your energy levels constant, if not growing, right, throughout this whole process. And if you're doing it right, you go through the whole 10 stages and all 7 cycles, and your energies will increase, right? That's the idea, right? And so once you've done the purification and your energy levels are up and constant, then you can fast. And this is where I know a lot of people who go off overseas and do a 30-day water fast, and they haven't addressed any of the previous things, right? I had a guy ring me up one day, and he'd just been in for an operation, and he had a lot of reactions from side effects from the operations. And I said, well, how many bowel motions are you having a day? And he said, maybe one every 2 days. And I said, well, I wouldn't have even recommended you have an operation until you're doing 3 bowel motions a day. I said, because your body, all the symptoms he had were simply due to the fact that his body was so toxic and his elimination pathways weren't working. So he had to have an operation. So I suggested if he had come to me and gone through a full detox, then he wouldn't have needed the operation. But he had the operation, and all the anesthetic and all the surgery created more toxicity in his body, and it was already literally coming out his ears. So he couldn't handle it, right? So that's why he had such an adverse reaction to the operation, right? So once you actually understand how crucial the first 3 stages are, then your body will have enough energy in reserve to deal with the fast, right? Just because you're fasting doesn't mean the rest of your cells need energy to function, right? So when you look at it in this way, like the body on a nutritional level, it needs nutrients going into the cell and toxins coming out of the cell in every moment, right? So if you've got enough energy, and that's stored energy as well, and part of the thing that energizes you is having synergy within all the foods that you're energizing with, right? That synergy increases all your nutritional reserves, so you can afford to have a fast, right? And the first time through, you might just have 1 day fasting. The next time through, you might have 5 days. The next time through might be 10 days. And this is where there's all different types of fasts. There's water fasting, dry fasting, vegetable juice fasting, right? And there's just having fruits, whatever, right? So this is where one of the laws of healing that I talk about is everything's appropriate when it's appropriate. You have to know and understand all the factors, and essentially no one's really going to understand all the factors until I've written the book on the energies and properties of food, where I explain in detail that there's 3,456 energies and properties of food. And until people know and understand how that relates to their body and all the processes, how the foods affect the body and so on, then they won't really know exactly what type of fast. And it's all just educated guessing as far as I'm concerned, right? So when people, go off overseas and jump straight into a 30-day water fast, I can predict what symptoms they're going to have, right? I had a lady from New Zealand go and do something, and when their friend told me what they'd just done, I said, oh no, that was the worst thing they could have done. I listed off all the symptoms, and they said, yeah, that's exactly what they had, right? So once you know, it's very easy to interpret what the reactions are going to be if you get it wrong. All right, so the fasting, again, there's no standard answer. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, what do you think about water fasting? What do you think about dry fasting? And it's like, well, it's appropriate when it's appropriate, right? Some people can do a water fast, for 30 days on the first time through. And this is where I'll explain to you how all this comes about when it's appropriate. The next stage is re-energizing and directing your energies, right? So once you've fasted, fasting, if you look at it in terms of the Dharma meditation and everything I talk about, it's the stillness, emptiness, and silence, right? So it's the emptiness, right? So when you're empty and you're not filling the digestive system, the gastrointestinal tract with food, that helps the body, because it consumes so much energy. A lot of the times it gives other systems and organs of the body a chance to re-energize. Right, so once you actually break the fast, the idea is to re-energize your body. And a lot of the times, because those organs and systems have had a bit of a break, they've got more energy and more clarity from maybe having a break from junk food or something. They've got a lot more energy, and that energy, again, has to be directed, right? So this is where I talk about in all the other videos and the events, directing your energy towards nature, soul, and food, right? learning more, practicing more of the breathing and so on. You have to redirect all the energy, direct all the energy you have towards what you already know, right? The next one after that is cleansing. And this is where, again, there's no standard answer in terms of how to do a bowel cleanse, how to do a liver detox. As far as I'm concerned, a liver detox is more or less just a cleanse, right? Or a gallbladder flush, or a probiotic flush, or a kidney flush, right? You can do flushes or full-on detoxes, right? Just doing a liver, like doing a gallbladder flush is just a cleanse, right? Doing a heavy metal detox of the kidneys or the brain, that's like a detox. So a lot of the times cleansing and detoxification are blurred, right? Cleansing, if you interpret this way, is just, it's a temporary thing which may only last like 12 hours, at the most maybe 3 days, right? If you do a gallbladder flush, you know, you might work on even, you know, if you're doing all the apple juice and lead up to it, you might do that for 2 weeks as part of the energizing and everything, right? And the fasting, you might just do an apple juice fast, right? And then increase your energies before you do a gallbladder flush, right? So cleansing is where, if you've never had green vegetables and you have a bit of some of the, like a green smoothie or a green vegetable juice, chances are it's going to give you a bowel reaction, right? Your body's not going to be used to it. It may cause diarrhea. It may even cause constipation or something, right? So just a gentle cleanse of something that somebody who's been doing vegetable juices for 10 years, right, they could have a really strong green vegetable juice. But somebody who didn't like greens as a child and still doesn't like green vegetables, to have a green juice or a green smoothie, that could put them into a detox, right? It could actually force them into a detox, right? It can be too much too soon. So this is where you may even have to dilute it down and give them half a glass instead of a full glass, right? You have to be very wary of where people are at or where you're at with it, right? So once you've done the cleanse, you can re-energize and direct the energy again, because this is where I said you're going to have more energy, and you need to focus more on directing that energy towards something that's, you know, empowering, something that's creative. And remember, it's all about being in the flow, having fun. So you've got more energy, and more energy that needs to be directed, all right? So once you've got all that sorted, then you start the detoxification process. And now this is where it comes into it. Are you, so cleansing, sorry, just going back to the external factor again. So I forgot about the external factor when it comes to fasting. Fasting means you may have a break from social media. The fasting may mean that you just turn your phone off for a day or a weekend or a whole week or something, right? So, you know, fasting, you know, in terms of the house, right? Because you're fasting, you may just have a break from work, right? If you're a workaholic, you may just have a break from work. So then re-energizing and directing the house is once you've had a break from work, and then you may have actually gone out there and got fitter, right? So you're getting re-energized and you're directing more of your time towards your health, fitness, and well-being. Right, so cleansing in the external part, you might just clean the bathroom, right? Or you might take time out and sweep the floor or hose the gutters out or something like that in the house. There's always cleansing and detoxification needed. It's a matter of prioritizing internally and externally what's next, right? So once you've re-energized and redirected the energy, right, say for example, if you get up and clean the gutters out, all of a sudden you may find you've got termites or something in the rafters or something, right? So that becomes, you're redirecting your energy towards the priorities, right? So this is where it keeps everything internally and externally maintained. So the detoxification part externally means that you may just, if you didn't take care of this during the elimination process, because you've now got more energy and you're redirecting the energy, then you may find that the detoxification or even the cleansing stage, that a lot of things you were holding on to or hoarding, you want to eliminate now, right? So again, cleansing and detoxification are very focused forms of eliminating, right? You're eliminating something or someone, or an experience or an environment. Yeah. So the detoxification externally may mean that you just go through all your clothes and get rid of everything that's got synthetic fibers in it, right? Then once you do that, you re-energize, and again, this time you have to redirect. This is not just directing the energy, this is redirecting the energy. And the reason why I say the redirect is because after a detox, it actually takes you to another level, and it usually means that your priorities completely change. And you may have been prioritizing doing gym for half an hour morning and night. And all of a sudden, you might now redirect all that energy to spending half an hour morning and night with your family or with your children or with your partner, right? So what happens is after the detoxification process, you can start to see things completely differently, right? And I took one guy through the detoxification process, and at the end of it, he said to me, "Holy bloody hell, Brian, right? My whole sense of self's completely changed. Who I thought I was before the detox is completely different now." He said, "I thought I was a person who liked Netflix and I liked all these things, but having done the detox, I realized none of that was me. It was all still compensatory, right?" And then he's now having to redirect all that time and energy that he's got towards something that he truly loves on a soul level, and that's just not a false positive on an ego level, right? Those of you that know the book will understand the subtleties and the depth of what I just said. A lot of people can't distinguish between a false positive ego and a true soul element, right? An ego element and a soul element, right? That's why, like I say, somebody had told me that doing all the extreme sports and stunt work and that sort of thing when I was a kid, when I was younger, that was all compensatory. But at the time, it was what I thought I loved doing, right? But I was still trying to, because I was so toxic, trying to prove something to myself. When I did go through all these detoxification things, that's when all of those things just naturally fell away, right? So if it's not pure, if it's not true to who you are, the detoxification stage, it will force it to fall away. And chances are 99% of the time, it's going to reveal things of what's missing again, right? Oh my God, this is why I talk about, people going, oh my God, I loved the piano when I was 10 years old and I gave it up when we had to move house and there was no room for the piano. And they reconnect with things that they love doing, right? So this is where you have to redirect your energy, because having detoxed something, it's brought the light back into what was missing, right? So once you've re-energized and redirected the energy, then the next level is that you have to repeat the whole cycle again, right? So in order to do that, you may have to prepare. There may be whole preparation for that next cycle, right? I've just gone through a detoxification process. I've just moved from the Gold Coast to the Sunshine Coast. So I'm now redirecting my time and energy towards the things that I truly love doing, right? So I'm going to go back through the whole cycle again. So just to re-energizing and redirecting externally, like just the example I just gave, I'm re-energizing myself. I mean, in the environment here in Montville is so much more natural and pristine than what it was in central Gold Coast, right? And, I loved being on the Gold Coast for the lifestyle and the climate and everything, but it just got too busy and too built up, and now with all the 5G, it just made it unlivable, right? So now that I'm here, even though I've been extremely busy and unpacking and everything, and setting up the office and the clinic downstairs, I'm now going to redirect all the energy back towards all my own soul elements. I've been out mountain biking twice. I've been doing some fantastic tracks up in Taunton, and I haven't done that for years. Yeah. So this is where, when you look at it in terms of the material, it's the nested tori. So each detoxification will usher in the next stage of evolution, and with that comes things that you can't possibly imagine. And if you can imagine it, then chances are it's something you got disconnected with when you were younger, right? But if you can't imagine it, chances are that it's something that your body didn't have enough energy to start with. Even in utero, you may not have had enough energy to fire up pathways to give you a soul connection, right? So the idea is to repeat it all again. So this is where you have to do that whole 10-stage process 7 times in a 2-year period, right? And this is where it gets pretty dodgy, to try and explain all the subtleties of it all and the exactness of it, right? If I say to a person who's morbidly obese, smokes cigarettes, drinks alcohol, eats a meat-based diet, doesn't exercise, is in a terrible relationship, works too much, has a porn addiction, has sexual dysfunction. If I say to that person, that they need to be vegan, they need to do this, they're just going to think I'm not being realistic, right? So the main thing is you have to work out what's appropriate, right? So if I talk to a person who's, like when I was in India last time, I talked to a guy who hadn't eaten green vegetables for 7 years, right? Hadn't had a green vegetable, right? So obviously the first time you go through that process is going to be very gentle and subtle, right? The reason why it's subtle is because when I talk about the neurological state that people are in, when they're so toxic, they're neurologically stressed and they're easily triggered by things, right? So even by suggesting something that may not be appropriate to them, that it may not be appropriate, is enough to get their back up, right? So like I say, with the 6 in the circle, with your finger in your foot, if you can't self-correct, chances are they're not open to being corrected, right? So the first time through with somebody who's really toxic is gentle. If you know NLP and all that sort of stuff, then you can NLP the crap out of them and make them think that it's their idea, right? Women are good at that, right? So the 7 cycles over 2 years, right? The first time you go through that whole 10-stage process, it may take you 10 months, right? You may, if a person's really, really low in energy and literally can't get out of a chair, or has just recovered from an operation or something like that, it may take them 3 weeks to energize, right? And just once you energize them, and the way you energize is working towards eliminating. If you have a person who's having 1 bowel motion every 2 or 3 days, they've got no energies, they've been confined to bed or something, right? And this can be just even yourself if you're recovering from a flu or something, or recovering from an injury, right? If you get your energies up, and then once your number of bowel motions a day is always crucial, right? One of the things that was most funny about Gandhi is that one of the first things he used to ask people is, how many bowel motions you're having a day, or how are your bowel motions? Because that was always the gauge as to how healthy and connected the person is. Because when your bowels are moving, your actual life is flowing, right? Not just your life, but all your energies and your creativity is flowing, your self-expression is flowing, right? So Gandhi was smart enough to know that. All right, so if people aren't eliminating, they're backed up. And if they're backed up, they're holding on to things of the past, they're harboring emotions, they're rigid in their opinions and so on, right? So the first time you go through it with a person who's really, really toxic, it has to be very gentle. Again, we're looking to get through this whole thing without creating a single side effect other than an increase in energy and a more clarity in their mind. So the other extreme opposite is if I talk to somebody who's been vegan for 30 years, who's a triathlete, who's in a really good career, they're a professional person with lots of time and things to go on holidays and do triathlons around the world. The first time I take that person through this 10-stage, the first cycle through, it may be as strong as and intense as the 5th time as a morbidly obese person would, right? So you can't compare the two people, right? It may, if a person's got a really good constitution, their 3rd time through this cycle may be equal to the 1st time of an elite athlete. But, if they've got a poor metabolism, poor constitution, it may be the 5th time through, right? So this is where when people come to me and they say, oh, you know, I'm starting to take this as a detox, like something like zeolites, right? As they go, oh, you know, I'm taking zeolites to get rid of heavy metals and so on. I was like, I'm going to say, no way, that's the last thing you should take, right? Because, you know, they're not drinking enough water, or the quality of water they're drinking is not good enough. And they're only having one bowel motion a day, right? So before you take any really strong detoxifying supplements or agents, you need to be having at least 3 bowel motions a day, right? So, you know, a lot of people want to go on and, you know, they say, oh, you know, my naturopath told me I need to, you know, do a parasitic detox. And I say, well, how many bowel motions are you having a day? I say, oh, well, only one every 2 days. And it's like, you're not ready for a detox yet, right? You're not even eliminating properly yet, right? So you can, like, to give you an idea, I had a person ring me up on Christmas Day one day, and they said that we're having really bad experience. And I said, so what have you been eating? And they said, I haven't been eating. And I said, why not? And I said, well, my naturopath put me onto a detox. And it's like, I said, it was 36 degrees and 98% humidity on the Gold Coast. You know, why would you be doing that? And, you know, the number one law or principle you need to understand when it comes to the environment is that you don't do the detox stage when you've got sweat on your brow or socks on your feet, right? It means your body's either trying to stay cool or it's trying to stay warm, right? Again, there's exceptions to every rule. If, like the guy I was just talking about there before, he was a professional guy, he was in between contracts, and he pressured me into taking him through the whole detoxification process in the middle of summer in Melbourne, right? But because of all the factors I'm going to talk about soon, he knew the material, he knew me well enough, and I said, look, I'll do it on the condition you do everything I say exactly as I say it. And he went through nearly the whole thing. He started his contract early, so he cut it a bit short. He went through the whole thing with only just a couple of little hiccups, right? So you can do it even in the extreme heat of Melbourne in summer, but you need to be carefully monitored and really know what you're doing, right? So the other thing I want you to realize is that once the more you do this, the quicker you can go through the cycles. And that's why, you know, if I say it might take 10 months to go through the first time, if you do it right the first time, it makes the next cycles quicker, right? But if you're already fit, right, the first time you go through it, it may be the same duration as somebody who's really toxic and unhealthy and unfit, right? It means that you're going into it a lot stronger and a lot harder the first time, right? So the main thing is when you're detoxing, whether you're detoxing heavy metals, right? When I came back from my last trip around the world, I was so toxic from having spent so much time in dirty, stinky, filthy cities. I had 10 heavy metals and I spent 10 weeks completely blown out doing a detox, right? And I'd well and truly lost my sense of humor by the time I got back. I was so unwell. But duty called, that's where I had to go, right? But the detoxification process, I had to do that even though I was busy working, right? So whether you're doing heavy metals or whether you're doing parasites, or it could even be detoxifying from a relationship, right? This is another key point. You do not do an external detox at the same time as you're doing an internal detox, right? The external detox may result from having done an internal detox, right? So like I just finished, like the last month, I've been moving house and setting up and everything like that. There's no way anybody would do a detox or even a cleanse in the middle of that, right? You have to be logical about this. So, so this is where, if you understand this key point, right? Every single moment of your life from now on, you have to be able to identify that you're at one of these 10 stages of a cycle, right? So the idea is the initial reset of your energy. You have to do the 10 stages 7 times in 2 years. That's to get you back to your natural state. That's the intent of it. The idea of it is then to maintain the natural state, which means you're forever going to be doing one of these 10 stages, and you're going to be putting yourself into the maximum cycle at least once a year, right? So if I do an event and I say hands up those who have done a full parasite detox, very few hands go up, right? So, you know, animals in the wild, when they come out of hibernation or whatever, they eat all the grasses and the berries and everything like that to actually put themselves into a detox, right? Ready for all the consumption of their food and everything like that leading into spring and summer, right? We've basically been deprogrammed out of that experience, right? So, you know, if you haven't done a full detox, parasitic-wise or heavy metal-wise in your life, you cannot take yourself personally and seriously. You're still living in the dualities of being your parent's child, an animal born in captivity, and a victim of your society, right? That's not who you are. Everybody who's gone through that process with me has come out saying, oh my God, my whole sense of self's completely shifted, literally into another paradigm, having gone through this, right? So it's a very conscious and deliberate means of ushering in a new paradigm, and you have to be realistic in your expectations and expect miracles, right? So the miracle of you finding out who you truly are, beyond all this crap internally and externally in your body and life, that is beyond most people's imaginations, right? If you've never done a detox, then you're never really able to see things clearly. You have to accept that that's a law, right? So the 7 cycles over 2 years, right? So it's possible to do the 7 cycles over 2 years, even though I say you don't do a detox in the middle of spring and in the middle of winter or summer, right? You can still do a detox late autumn or early spring, right? Depending on all the other factors I'm going to talk about. And but at the same time, you can time it. You can start this whole process any day, literally starting now, right? And depending if you're like, we're just coming into winter, or we're actually in winter, but it's not the coldest part of the year yet. So I could go through all of that. I could go through the first 7 stages up to detoxifying between now and say the end of July, right? Because the weather's not too extreme here in Montville. It's nowhere near as warm as what it is on the Gold Coast, right? But this is where you have to adapt to all the climatic things I'm about to talk about. So this is the next thing, right? Once you're aware of all the laws, dynamics, and processes of everything I talk about in the book, and you've been able to maintain your energies throughout the whole process, the next time you go through it, because once you've re-energized and redirected the energies, right, you usually need to take some time out to the repeat part is you need to regather your thoughts, right? You need to actually take some time out. I'm going to put all this into a book in great detail at some point. But the way you actually start the repeat part is where you go back and do your 7 great lists, those of you that know that, and the 6 soul elements. And by the time you get your head and heart around all the changes and growths and transformations that have occurred, right, you're still going to be energizing that throughout the whole time. The redirecting is going to automatically take care of the elimination and the purification and the fasting, right? And you're no longer just re-energizing and directing. You can then start with a cleanse, right? When stage 9, when you get to that point, it automatically takes care of the first 5 of the next cycle, right? It doesn't always do that. That will only happen maybe for one person, it may be the 5th time through the cycle. Another person, they may be able to jump to cleansing on the 3rd time, right? But again, if you go through a heavy metal detox, the first time through the cycle, you may have to go through the first 5 stages again in preparation for a parasitic detox, right? So there's so many factors that you need to address here according to your individual priorities, right? Like I know people who live in big cities in India, and they're so full of heavy metals, they have depression often, right? And there's a lot of arsenic and heavy metals in the water there as well. So there's a lot of mental health issues, right? A great actor is just suicide, and it's rocked the whole country of India, right? They don't understand it's the lack of detoxification as part of our culture that's causing all these mental health issues. If we had a detoxification program or this protocol, again, I'm hoping to create this protocol so self-evident and indisputable and undeniable that it becomes a natural part of people's lifestyle. Every spring, if they can't do the whole thing for 2 years, at least do a detox of some kind in every spring, right? But I want it to become part of our way of life, where this is an integrated part of it, right? And it will be so much beneficial, for our relationships and our productivity and our functionalities on every level of our being. And again, it's a reality that most people can't even possibly imagine. Everybody's gone through it. They all tell me it's beyond my imagination where I am at today from when I started. So I appreciate a lot of people on the call and watching the video may think I'm exaggerating, right? But until you've done it and actually experienced it yourself, you may not have the reference points of where I'm coming from. A lot of people come to me having read the book and having done this, go, oh my God, it's so obvious where you're coming from and what you're doing and why you're doing it now. And it's like, well, welcome to my world, right? So the 7 cycles over 2 years, again, there's no set rules, there's no standard approach to anything, right? But I want you to understand the higher the level you go, the more pure, the more detoxed and everything you are, the more proficient you are in knowing how to cleanse, whether you have a dry fast or whether you have a green vegetable juice fast or whatever, whether you're fasting in preparation for, whether you're fasting in preparation for a heavy metal detox, or whether you're fasting in preparation to get out of a narcissistic abusive relationship, right? It's all relative to what you're addressing in your life, internally and externally, right? Okay, any comments? So all good so far, Mark?
Yep. You're going to cover about being vegan?
Yeah, give me time.
Yep.
All right, so now this is where a lot of people, this is not something I'm going to go into, but all of the above is in relation to there's 18 stages of healing and 18 levels of healing. All right, so I just showed you the evolution from the regression and the evolution in the aspects and the regression in the aspects. Essentially, there's 18 stages from going from the worst state or for whatever state you're in to your ultimate state. There's 18 stages. It doesn't matter how you look at it, right? Again, you may skip stages if you nail it, right? So there's 18 stages. So if something's rolling down a hill, you have to be able to stop it. And you need to be able to stop the forces pushing it and the forces pulling it and everything like that. And then get the energy going back the right way, up over the hill and get it to roll down, right? So the whole process is 18 stages. So if there's those 18 stages and there's, say, an 18-story building next to that, and you're observing that whole process from the different floors, so there's different levels of understandings as to all the laws, dynamics, of processes associated with each stage, right? So if somebody's at stage 1 of healing, right, but they're actually at level 15, if there's 18 stages, so level 13 is the tipping point, right? So if they're at level 15 with their understanding of the laws, dynamics, and processes associated with healing and growth and everything, then if they're at stage 1, chances are their healing process is going to be a lot quicker than somebody who's at level 3 of healing, right? This is for people who have done the universal kinetics and other workshops. So I talk about these 18 stages and 18 levels, right? So again, the more you know and understand the material, the more obvious this becomes, right? And the more you can individualize it for yourself and your loved ones, or if you're a practitioner for the people you treat, right? So I'm just going to look at the main points. There's lots of main points. So how are we going for time? I can't see the clock here. Oh, it's 9:15. Okay. Well, that's gone fast already. All right. So the main points are age. And if I treat an 85-year-old Inuit in Alaska, it's going to be for diabetes. It's going to be very different than if I treat a 5-year-old child in Hawaii, indigenous Hawaiian, with juvenile diabetes, right? It's going to be very different relative to age and relative to environment. So these are all the factors that you need to be aware of. Lifestyle, and then you've got what work do they do, what roles are they in, what's their sleep patterns like, what's their daily routine like, what's their social life like, what's their exercise routine like, and what's their entertainment and media exposure, right? I was talking to somebody a little while back who watched a conspiracy video and it just rocked their world to the point where it just debilitated them for a long time. Yeah. So these are some of the key points, right? So this has to be relative to the overall state, like I showed you, the overall nature of life. So the next one is religion and culture, right? So you have to look at their diet, whether they accept veganism. Right? There's no point me talking to Muslims about being vegan. Some are very open to it. Seventh-day Adventists and Hindus are obviously very easy to get through to. But like if I'm doing work in Roma, which is the meat capital of Australia, there's no point me talking about veganism there, otherwise I'll get hunted out of town. Yeah. So acceptance of natural processes, right? A lot of cultures, especially people like Koreans and Japanese, they're not very accepting of natural things. They're so indoctrinated in the medical system and everything like that, have got all the answers. So they're not usually open to herbs. They're very suspicious of it due to all the indoctrination and the brainwashing, right? And their mainstream influences, right? So, if I can talk to somebody about doing a full-on detox up to the point where if they're Jehovah's Witness, right, then it gets limited as to how far I can actually explain things in detail, right? So that whether it's a mainstream religion or whether it's a mainstream influence where they might be a fan of even Deepak Chopra, right? I try to talk to people who are Deepak Chopra fans, and I can't. Their distorted interpretation of Ayurveda from having listened to him compared to where I'm coming from, it becomes a bit of a barrier for them, right? So this is what I'm talking about is mainstream alternative, mainstream natural. It's not always true according to nature, right? So just keep that in mind, right? So priorities in their life, right? This is where, a person might be morbidly obese. They might have diabetes. They might have, heart palpitations, whatever. But if I say to them, they have to change things up or start doing a detox, that may not be their priorities if they're going to be sitting for an exam, right? So you have to work in, there's no point even talking past the energizing part if all their priorities are elsewhere, right? If they just want to get through the exam, you support them in that, but then you plant the seeds for what comes after, right? So some religions don't put any emphasis on health at all. Right? Some religions are centered on health. And this is the other important factor, the support from family and friends. I spent a lot of time with a lady one day who was in a really bad situation with gallbladder stones. And she had booked into doing having a gallbladder removed. And I said, look, there's a very simple and easy way of doing it naturally. I explained I've guided so many people through doing a gallbladder flush. And I went overtime, explained it all to her, wrote it out, gave her all the websites, gave her all the naturopaths to get all the supplements and everything through. I don't deal with supplements directly. So next time I was visiting that town, I was doing a clinic circuit. Next time I went there, I bumped into her in the street and I said, how'd you go? And she looked at me, she said, oh, Brian, I went home, like she had an unsupportive husband. She had, I don't know how many children. And went home and she told her husband what she needed to do in order to be able to keep her gallbladder. Her husband was just antagonistic and dismissive and said, we haven't got time and money for that. So she had to go through and get the gallbladder removed. And I was absolutely shocked and stunned with the fact that she did that, right? So again, it comes down to, like I said before, the dominant force. Even though on the day, the dominant force was all the inspirations I was sharing with her, she went home and got met with the complete opposite energy, and that was more intense. So she just had to do that, right? So a lot of people can't do what they know they need to do simply because they don't have the support, either time or energy either, right? So one of the other main points are religion, the resources, the means. So this is where, if I say to somebody, you need to do this detox, this whole process does work out to be quite expensive for a lot of people, right? So if they don't have the means, which is the financial means of buying all the products, or being able to do the juicing, just being on vegetable juice fast or something, or just doing a vegetable juice cleanse, it's often too expensive for people. Right? A lot of the times people just want to pick my brains to save coming for a full consultation where I can go through individually with them, because they're trying to save money. Right? The financial restrictions is one of the reasons why people don't know and understand all this. They simply don't have the time and energy to, or the money to put aside to be able to go through the whole process. They just want quick fixes, right? So most people just simply don't have the means, and they don't have the opportunity. They can't take 6 weeks off to do a full detox, right? So you often have to work within their lifestyle and their work routines, right? And then the availability of it, right? So a lot of people, when I talk to them around the world, they simply can't access wheatgrass, or they may not be able to access zeolites, or they may not be able to access good probiotics, right? Sometimes products and things like that is just not available to them, right? So they're the biggest factors for a lot of people. Then you've got diet, the food quality, right? So this is, if you think in terms of food quality, what they're eating in the past, or what they've eaten in the past, what they're eating now, and what they're going to be eating, right? If you can get through to a person and tell them to stop eating, commercial foods and start eating organically, that's going to help facilitate going through the 10 stages a lot better than just staying on supermarket food, right? Or if you're in India or something like that, where there's been massive soil depletion and the food quality is really low and it's not fresh and all that sort of stuff, right? There's no point putting a person even on a cleanse if they don't get the energy from the food, yeah? So that's where if they may have a really bad diet, but when I was last in India, you can now get a lot of all the supplements. They are available, like the availability is there, right? So you can often supplement that, right? Their nutritional intake, right? So if they've got depleted soils and food and that sort of stuff, then their nutritional intake may have been very low. But then if you're talking to an elite athlete who's taking like $100 worth of supplements a week, and so on, you can actually get them to go through the whole cycle. They'll have the energy and everything like that to be able to do a cycle much quicker, right? Then whether they're vegan or not, right? I'll talk about that more later. The water quality in their intake. And then another thing is what medications, right? And how long they've been on it, right? If a person's been on, say, like I'm talking to a person who's just started taking antidepressants, they started taking them before they met me. So now it's up to them to get enough clarity to know how and when to go off those meds, right? So, but if they've been on the meds for 3 years, then their body's already settled into it. They're still adjusting to these medications, right? What have they taken in the past, and what are they taking now, right? You have to factor that in. And the same with supplements. You have to, how long have they been taking wheatgrass, right? I treated somebody the other day with a brain tumor, and I told them when they first got diagnosed that they need to get onto olive leaf extract and keep taking it for the rest of their life, basically. And because of the symptoms of the brain tumor, they didn't have enough support to follow through on it. They regressed and their brain tumors come back, right? So because they've been off the olive leaf extract, they have to ease into it again to make sure they don't get a reaction, right? If they had been taking it the whole way through, we would have got a stronger one and given more frequent and bigger doses, right? And then what have they taken, and what are they taking, right? So if a person comes to me with any problems, any stage or any cycle of the detox, what supplements are they taking, and what have they taken? And because if they just read out of olive leaf a week ago and they haven't taken it for a week, they can start onto it again pretty quickly, right? So veganism, this is obviously a contentious issue, and it's something I'm looking forward to having some big conversations with some high-profile people with about shortly. But veganism is where people don't understand the natural laws, dynamics, and processes of the body, right? And the main thing is this is what, there's a Professor Bonnie Bassler. I didn't get time to write all this in, but there's a TED talk where how bacteria communicate. And this is quite old now, and there's a lot more information about this, but up to 90% of the cells in your body by number, not volume, but by number, are microorganisms or parasites and worms and that sort of thing. So that means that there's good bugs and bad bugs. If you can have a good bug in one part of your body, but it's a bad bug if it's somewhere else, right? If it's not in the right place. I had that one time when I was taking the wrong probiotics, right? So what happens, what Bonnie Bassler is talking about, how all the different bacteria communicate, but what science hasn't yet discovered, which is what I'm talking about, is all the microorganisms, whether it's fungus, yeast, mold, parasites, worms, mycoplasmas, they're all talking to each other as an army, right? So like you've got the bacteria and all the different bacteria are like one branch of the military, and then you've got all the platoons and everything like that, the different strains and species, right? So they're all talking to each other, and this is the biggest thing that people do not do properly when they become vegan, is they have to know how to go through these 10 stages of detoxification and purification in order to be able to eliminate the bugs, right? So the people who are having trouble having converted to veganism or in the process of converting veganism, it's because they're not dealing with the microbiome, and they're not dealing with all the parasites and the viruses and so on. Well, not that there's viruses, if you know anything about the truth about those, but they're not dealing with all the bugs in their system that's causing the craving. So like if you look at it, if you've got nematode parasites, you'll crave potatoes. If you've got fungus in your system, you'll crave peanuts and corn. So every microorganism has its own cravings. And this is where you can usually zero in on what a person's got in their system and where it is. I do iris diagnosis, that sort of thing. And you can pinpoint what a person's priorities are in terms of bugs, right? So, so when you look at the actual number of bugs, if the bad bugs are the dominant force, the only cells in your body that feed off animal products are the bad bugs. Right? This is something that's very contentious, and I'm willing to go toe to toe with anybody on this, right? Because you've got the imbalance in your bugs, then, I've treated so many people who have got cravings, and whether they've got it from golden staph or having had vaccinations or something like that, they start to have cravings. Those bugs have either been injected into them, or this is where the two theories, you've got germ theory and terrain theory. They're both right if you take into account the mycoplasmas, right? I won't go into the whole thing, but the somatid cycle of the aerobiosis, right? I looked into that in '99. I need to refresh myself on it all, but this is where they're both right, right? And this is where there's genetically modified mycoplasmas or somatids, and this is where they're going dormant in all the vaccinations, and this is what's being activated by all the 5G, causing things like Morgellons disease and Lyme's disease, all that sort of stuff, right? So it's a big topic, right? And I want to research it thoroughly before I start really speaking out about it. And nobody really understands health and the microorganism element of detoxification until they understand mycoplasmas and the cycles they go through. Right. This is why if you do a microorganism parasite detox, anti-parasitic detox or whatever, you have to do it for a 6-week cycle to get rid of the eggs, right? And a lot of people I take them through like a 3-month cycle because their energies are so high, having done it properly, they can do an extra 6-week cycle, and on the first time through often, that you keep their energies up and they can keep detoxifying for longer, and literally they don't know themselves when they're finished, right? So the main problem with people who try vegan diets is that they have not done the detox or even done a cleanse leading into that change. So they may have gone to Bali 20 years ago, got Bali belly, those bugs are still in their system, craving pork, giving them a porn addiction or whatever, and they try to become vegan without having addressed that. I mean, it's completely ludicrous. This is how far we've come away from our natural understanding of how our body functions and how the imbalances in our microbiome affects our whole attitudes and behaviors, right? So until we've actually done a full detox, then we literally won't see the light of truth, yeah? We're just completely blocked from it. So again, we have to go through it according to what's missing and not what the excesses are, right? So we have to look at what deficiencies there are that comes from if 90% of the cells in your body are microorganisms and the dominant force of those are negative bugs causing cravings, right? Then you don't have to worry about the cravings of cheese. You don't have to worry about the excesses of what you're eating in terms of corn chips or something like that. Once you hit the nail on the head with whatever microorganisms giving you those cravings and you put back what's missing, because you may have had it your whole life since a dog licked you on the face when you're 3 years old, you've got a lifetime deficit or depletion of nutrients. And once you kill the bug that's robbing them and putting that back into the rest of your body, the part of your body, the cells of your body that are actually you start to have energy. That's what the whole energization process is. It's the redirecting the energy away from the bad bugs back to your cells, so you actually become a conscious being and not just an intelligent animal keeping a balanced diet, right? It's all about energizing the cells that are you so you can actually have a true supernatural experience of it in a human form on Earth, yeah? So I won't go into it, but this is where this is a great image. You've got all the anatomical and dietary functions and everything like that of the different carnivores, omnivores, herbivores, frugivores, and humans. And when you look at this chart, honestly, I can't find any more evidence to support a vegan diet other than that chart. And to me, it's so obvious. Obviously, a lot of people are going to dispute it, but again, you can't really talk to somebody about a pure diet until they've gone through the whole cycle, if that makes sense. Until somebody's gone through a cycle, until they've done a full detox, and if they're really stubborn with their diet, maybe even 3 times through before they're even really willing to listen to you, right? Some people go up through it the first time, they have such a shift in their state of mind and their level of consciousness that they go, holy shit, right? And that my whole life is giving people like wow moments where they realize for themselves, because again, like I said, most people aren't interested in hearing it, but until you give them a direct experience of it themselves, right, until they've actually had the opportunity to connect with that truth themselves, it's all just information, right? So Petals is stirring, so I'll just put her up here for a bit. Right, so that's my favorite chart, right, when it comes to diet. So the other things you need to consider, I will try and wrap this up shortly, is habits and addictions, right? If I talk to a drug addict, can you go cold turkey, yes or no? If they say no, then they don't have the energy and all that sort of thing to deal with it, right? So that's a whole protocol in itself. But the idea is to go through the detoxification and energization process properly, and all the habits and addictions will naturally fall away, all right? The duration of the addiction, like if you talk to somebody, like I was talking to somebody the other day who started smoking cigarettes at the age of 8 years old, right? Obviously, it's very deep in their psyche, right? So the duration of the addiction. So they may have become addicted to something, only in the last 5 years, but they may have been exposed to it since they were a child as well. If you're a passive smoker or something as a child. And and existing conditions, whether the person's got cancer, motor neuron disease, and then addictions, like if they've got really strong addictions like ice addictions and so on, and then if they've got weight issues. Most weight issues are the bugs in the gut, right, and heavy metals as well. Okay, so overall general health things, just people's lung capacities. Lung capacity often relates to how open they are to new ideas. Their breathing patterns, this is what I talk about, the 18 factors of breathing in the book. The overall constitution, like a lot of people, like if you were in Germany or even down Adelaide way where there's a lot of German people, they've got a really good constitution, so they can really handle rapid changes very well. And this is where I say to people, if you've got a really good constitution, you might like have a Lamborghini type constitution, but if you're putting diesel in your car, it's going to disturb your whole function. So that's your metabolism. So you might have a Lamborghini constitution, but with the wrong fuel, your metabolism is really bad. So we can determine that through your iris diagnosis again, and your overall cellular function, which is your energy levels and how often you're urinating and defecating. And then the intake, so how much a person's eating of all the different food groups and so on, and how much they're like, just because they're taking it in doesn't mean they're actually taking it in on a cellular level. If they've got malabsorption, and then they're relative to the elimination both on the organism level and on the cellular level. So if they're not eliminating on the lymph level, right, they'll have a lot of fluid retention, that sort of thing. Their overall fitness level. This is something I deal with a lot. People are often too fit to be able to go onto a detox, because a detox, like I was addicted to martial arts and all that adrenaline junkie stuff. So having a 6-week break, I would have gone into withdrawals. Like if I ever got injured doing martial arts, I would go through a withdrawal from that. It was actually quite horrific, yeah. People literally get adrenal junkies, right? Then gender as well. So with the fitness one, if somebody can couch potato, just even walking around for 5 minutes is often a bit of an effort. You got to get them to be able to do at least a 20-minute walk morning and night before you start doing a detox, right? Like I said, there's so many variables and things you need to be aware of. The gender, how they're going with their period cycles, again, whether they're breastfeeding. And this is one of the most important factors, is their overall sense of well-being. That's the main factor you focus on as you go through the whole cycles, right? The main factor you're looking for is their sense of humor. If somebody's lost their sense of humor, you need to ease off or stop that stage of the cycle and go back to energizing, right? Eliminating and purifying, right? Like I said, I lost my sense of humor when I had so many heavy metals in my system, right? So that's the key thing you're looking for. If I say that the first thing I check when I put somebody into a detox is, do you feel spiritually connected, yes or no? If they say no, that's the warning sign, which is what I'm going to get to. That's the first thing where you have to back off or stop that stage of whatever you're doing, right? So the idea is to push as hard as you can. You're pushing the envelope the whole time, but you're trying to do it symptom-free. You push to the point where you get symptoms and then back off. Push to the point where you get symptoms and back off, right? And that threshold is different for everybody, okay? So the environment, this is a very important one, the altitude, right? So if I'm in, the highlands of Nepal or something like that, the altitude and the oxygen levels is very different. The latitude, if you're up in Finland where the days are really short and the intensity of the sun's really low, all these things feed into the overall state of the person. The air quality as well. Like again, there's no point getting people to do breathing exercises when they're living next to a busy road. The actual weather, like if it's really dark and cold and wet, that you don't put people into a detox and that sort of thing. The actual season, if it's cold and wintry, or very hot and humid, or even hot and dry, this is all the Ayurvedic principles you need to factor in. And the exposures, what chemical exposures have they had, radiation exposures, what animals they've been exposed to, like people that are living on farms have got a lot of hydatid cysts and that sort of thing in them, and that's all part of what needs to be detoxed. And whether they've grown up with pets or whether they own pets, where they sleep on the bed with them and that sort of thing. And another big one is what travel destinations they've been to. When I was traveling around the world, I was talking to a lot of people with Delhi belly and Bali belly and all that sort of thing, and you would actually have to treat them according to all the above. Right, and then the individual character, right? How self-aware is the person? What's their level of knowledge? In the book, I've got a chart called the scale of knowledge. And then those of you that know the book again, the level where they're at on the life quest scale, and what their life experiences are, whether they've been traumatized by experiences, or whether they're suffering from a limited life experience, right? So if I talk to somebody who's been brought up in a really fundamental religion. They've had no life experience. So it's sometimes very challenging to broaden their understanding of all the factors that they need to heal from cancer or something like that, or even recover from depression. And another big factor is their personal reason. If they've got an ego, there's a reason for doing it, or if they're conscious, there's a purpose of doing the detox. One person might be doing it just to attract a partner, or to be able to buy different clothes so they can look good. Yeah. So that all comes into how you approach the whole process, and their level of interpersonal intelligence and natural intelligence. So I'll just quickly explain that. So these are the 9 areas of intelligence, and they're holographic. So all of the 9 have all 9 within themselves. So there's 81 intelligences, and it's the interpersonal intelligence and natural intelligence, which is, which is really beneficial to have when you're going through these cycles, this whole process. And they're the 2 that this society, most Western cultures and most cultures around the world, don't enable people to develop, right? So they're usually limited in this. And this is why videos like this or presentations like this become necessary, and it just doesn't go without saying. So the contraindications are mental health issues, right? Some people can't go into a detox if they've got mental health issues. They only stay at the cleansing level even before that, yeah? So again, you push them up to you don't want to push them to the edge of being suicidal. Their emotional state, like if they've just lost their job or had a relationship breakup, whether they're pregnant, whether they're breastfeeding, and whether you're dealing with the extremes of weather, and whether they've got weight issues, whether they're underweight and can't put on weight, or whether they're overweight and can't lose weight, or whether their weight's fluctuating really, really madly, right? People with weight issues, they've got metabolic issues, which is usually bugs in their gut, and that's causing them to have the wrong diet, right? And eating disorders is another thing, keeping in mind that eating disorders are often the result of sexual abuse and trauma. And then you've got nutritional deficiencies, right? When you know and understand nutrition, you can usually pick up the people's nutritional deficiencies as to whether how much synergy you put into all the energizing of the different food groups. And then the risks, these are the risks you got to watch out for. The mood swings. There's sudden and intense mood swings. Like if you've got a bug in your gut that's living in the lining of your gut, and it's been there since you're 3 years old, then all of a sudden you do a bowel cleanse, and that bug is exposed, and all of a sudden you're having emotions and reactions that were programmed into you when you were 3 years old, right? Any sudden or drastic changes in your energy levels. One of the big problems that comes with detoxing incorrectly is suicidal tendencies. Then you have all the inconvenient things like diarrhea and constipation. And I've spoken to people who went into a detox and have miscarried, and because they went onto a detox and didn't tell their naturopath that they were pregnant, and they gave them abortifacient herbs. And then you've got things like body odor and bad breath and flatulence, and changes in bowel motion and frequencies, which you may have to, if you're working, you may have to go to the toilet too many times a day, and your boss gets upset with you. Right? So the warning signs are being tired, sleepy, or lacking energy. They're the main 3 things. Then the mood changes, any change in your concentration and levels and your attention span, any changes in your sleep. You start having wild dreams, or just having any type of change in your dreams. If it's disturbing, ease off. And then if you start to really smell badly, it means that your elimination pathways aren't working properly. And then your bowel motions, if there's an increase or decrease too much, like if you're having 6 bowel motions a day and your energy levels are going up, that's fine. If you're having 6 bowel motions a day and your energy levels are dropping quickly, that's not good, right? And the most important one is changes in your thought patterns. If you start having earworms or persistent thoughts or whatever, and they're disturbing you, you have to back off or change what you're doing. You may have to go from having really strong green juices, and you may have to, if you've been having a green juice diet, you may have to reduce that and just have more root vegetables or something. All right, and then how are we going for time? We're out of time, really. So just the different philosophies. You've got Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. You've got the doshas within Ayurveda. This is where the more you understand the Ayurvedic principles going into all this, the better. I've got a whole different perspective and approach to all this, which I'll share. They've only, as you can see, within Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, they've only got 5 elements. I've got 8. And then, so the constitutions have different strengths and weaknesses, which means you're going to be, they can be triggered in different ways at different seasons and that sort of stuff. Within the Ayurvedic principles, you've got all the different Vata, Pitta and Kapha foods, ones which are beneficial and detrimental to the different constitutions. Again, the more you know and understand that, the better. So, if you start to have a sudden change of moods and they're Pitta, then you can have a Pitta pacifying herbal tea. That's one of the quickest ways of remedying it. Food combining is also essential through the whole process. If you can be fully raw, that some people can't handle raw, maybe till the 3rd or 5th cycle. Then the doctrine of signatures. I'll just quickly touch on this. This is where the different energies of the food's impact on the bowels, which then nourish the organs. This is one approach to it. But I've got an approach where there's, when you look at it all, there's 3,456 energies and properties of foods and your body playing out. So that's the depth which I'm going to go into it at some stage soon. So what perpetual reality? Where does it all start and stop? You are what you think, you are what you eat, you are what you think while you eat. So when you are doing the ritual of eating, as you're going through the whole process, it will keep you sane, it will keep you balanced, it will keep you on your path. The idea is to direct and redirect all the energy onto your path. And the way you stay centered through the whole process is every time you do a juice, every time you drink water, you do the ritual of eating around it, and it'll keep your energies expanding and connecting to the ultimate and the inevitable. Yeah. So that's pretty well it, everybody. So that's getting it all that off my chest. So I don't want to have to keep repeating this. This is one of the reasons why I did tonight. So any questions or comments? I'll just end sharing the screen. So did I miss anything there, Mark?
No, that's exactly how I remembered it. So yeah, great job. Thank you very much. So there's no chats that have come up, or I lie. There's something comes up. No, just got an amazing. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Curtis.
So was that all pretty clear to everybody? Sort of got through as much as I could in that bit of time.
I think one of the things I picked up when you're talking about, pushing it to the boundaries and then backing off, pushing to the boundaries, and then to the point of symptoms. A good reminder is that the symptoms can often be, we're looking for the subtleties of things. So the symptoms can often be very subtle. Like, so I remember my last time through it, I was, and you were down, I was a long way into a water fast, but then I just got a very minor left calf cramp overnight, and that was my signal to stop the water fast. So it could be, if you're going in with it with any sense of egoic attachment to I'm going to get to 6 weeks of water fasting, and you don't pick up on the subtleties, that can bring you undone as well. So
a lot of people won't understand or appreciate the depth to this. Like what you said, is the subtle things are the most powerful things. But what we're dealing with is we're dealing with the culture and the humanity that's so toxic, so desensitized. I talk about the 6 levels of sensitivity in my book. Most people are at the point of being desensitized or being hypersensitive. Yeah. And they're reacting to things, but they're not actually picking up on the subtle things, right? They say, oh, I'm picking up on that person's thoughts. That's all just because they're not minding their own business, but they're not actually picking up on the subtle changes within themselves. They're picking up on influences, but they're not picking up on changes. There's a big difference, right? So they're not picking up on the subtle changes. And this is where you've got to go through this, and to be effective and to make sure that you keep all your energies on track, you'd have to do like what Mark said, is be very tuned into it. And that's why, I didn't share this information so everybody can just go off and start doing it themselves. I'm just sharing with you, I've been doing this for 35 years. And like I said, I would experiment on myself. what happens if I ate a whole bunch of oranges on a really hot, humid day in the middle of summer? What would happen if I overate bananas in the middle of winter? I would do all these things to see all these subtle changes, right? So now when people are going through these processes and coming undone, I've learned how to quickly turn their energies around and redirect them, calm them down and redirect them, right? So this is not something you can just learn from watching this a few times over, right? This is something that I'm just introducing you to the nature of it all, the actual logic of it, and the fact that there are so many variables that you have to keep educating yourself on it. But then once you're clear enough on it, one thing I'll also add is that once you get into it and you're clear enough and you're detoxified enough, your intuitions can guide you, right? So this is where I talk about the zing foods, right? So if I said to you, what food would energize you the most right now? If you're a supernatural being in heaven or nirvana, if you could go and have any food at all, what food would give you the most zing, right? Some people might say watermelon. Some people might say lasagna, right? So this is why when you're tuning into that level, if you keep eating your zing food, chances are you won't have any deficiencies or deficits or anything like that, or even excesses as you go about it, right? It's maintaining that balance the whole time. Yeah. So somebody asked me, what about what I just saw the chats? I didn't look at the chats at all, but I just happened to see one of the chats that said something about what foods to break a fast. It's individual. You know, like if somebody's had a water fast and they're starting to get cramps, then they might need a celery juice, the watered down celery juice or something. Some people might need a piece of watermelon. You know, if it's cold and they've been having a water fast, they might need, you know, pineapple, right? So again, this is where if you tune into it, your body should tell you. If you're free of the bugs enough, you'll be able to listen to your body. A lot of people go, oh, you know, I listen to my body, and they're overweight and everything like that, and you've got no idea that the bugs in their guts telling them what to eat. Yeah. So, all right. So, were there any other questions or comments there at all?
Yeah. So you got that one, and then Ra was next. So asking, so what's next? A course, a training, a consult? What's Brian offering? And perhaps a reminder people can donate. Yes, I'll pop the donation link in again at the end.
Well, what's next for this is like I'm just sharing with people, mainly just to bring their attention to the risks involved, listening to people who are only seeing half the picture and who aren't, you know, able to address all the different stages. You know, like I said, I talk to people who've gone to practitioners and they've been put on products which, when I say, look, you're only on the first cycle, I don't think you should take that product. And I think people like taking turpentine and things like that, some people would just completely come undone on that until maybe the 5th cycle, right? Some people could do it on the 1st, right? So again, I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention the dangers involved with it, and the fact that there is a very clear logic to it. The more you look at this, the more you look at, you know, the more you experience it yourself, the more you will actually understand, you know, the need to really tune into what's going on. Yeah. So Joy just asked the question, what's an earworm? It's when you get a song stuck in your head. Yeah. So what was the other part to that, Mark? Was there another question?
No, that covered that. Michael was...
Oh, difference between cravings and intuitive eating. Okay. Cravings is like, well, put it this way. Usually cravings come about when you're already out of balance, right? You got to remember why cravings come up. It's when your blood chemistry has gone out, whether you're too acidic or whatever, or you're not breathing properly. Then, you know, you might just start craving something. Cravings are usually something that if you eat it and feel worse afterwards, that was a craving, right? If you eat it and you feel the zing straight away and you intuitively, like you might sit to eat a pawpaw or a mango and you get halfway through it and your body said that's enough, that's fine, right? But if you sit there and scoff down a whole pawpaw, right? I did that one time when I got out of hospital and nearly dying in India. I ate a whole pawpaw and that nearly killed me, right? So, so this is where if you feel worse after eating something, that wasn't right. If you feel really energized and clear, it was. And usually cravings are towards foods that are processed or, being cooked or something like that. Yeah. All right. Were there any other questions?
Did you read the one there from Mullen Peace?
No.
Okay. Do you want to read it or want me to read it out?
Yeah, I can't scroll at the moment. Oh,
that's okay. Brian, all that you have shared is incredible. Deep gratefulness here. Everything is so simple yet so vast. I find myself overwhelmed with all the possibilities that I'm discovering. How to be or not to be with my overwhelm while on this journey of purification at all levels of being? ?
Very simple. Take one breath at a time. You have to understand and accept that what's going on in your life and the world is none of your business, right? You have to understand that you're an instrument of grace in service to all beings in all worlds and all universes. And if you're not a light, if you're not feeling the love, sit down, shut up and be quiet until you are, right? The universe does not give you the right permission to be anything else other than an instrument of love, right? Anything less than that's not acceptable in the full light of truth, yeah? So, if you're getting burdened or overwhelmed by stuff, it means that you're involving yourself with things that aren't any of your business. The universe just wants you to be you and do what you're here to do. Forget about the rest of it. Yeah? It's all very black and white, all or nothing. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, so one question was, the more purified you get, the less you're disturbed by things, yeah? When people are toxic, they've got all these energies randomly going out, either attaching to or ricocheting or, whatever off the external world, and they're coming back and disturbing them even more, right? So the more pure you get, the more your energies you're going inwards to the 0 point, towards the stillness, emptiness, and silence, literally taking life as it presents itself to you with every breath and every heartbeat. The more toxic, the more outward energy, the more outward going thoughts, right? So the more pure you get, the more you go back to the divine nature, which is stillness, emptiness, and silence within the void, which is the all-embracing, all-encompassing, all-inclusive truth, yeah? So you're responding to everything rather than reacting to everything. If you're toxic, you're reacting. Most people in the world have just learnt to control their reactions, nothing more, right? Until you've gone through the whole purification process, you're not going to be clear and pure in order to be able to have a true response to everything for what it is and relative to who you are. Yeah, that will come. It's inevitable, right? That's why I'm presenting this information, because this is the inevitable path that everybody needs to be on, because the purification is a return to the natural state, which is being whole and complete, right? Again, there's no degrees of purity, right? That's why the purification is part of the cycle. Every time you get to it, you go, okay, I have to purify it because it's not essential. Like I said, anything between here and heaven, your ultimate natural state, has to go, right? So I have my swords drawn, ready to use the bloody things, right? Right? We can intensify the whole experience by bringing it into the now. Yeah. Anything else?
Kieran just mentioned about muscle testing for craving / intuitive foods prior to eating. So yes, I guess if we've got that.
So just remember, Kieran, that all the universal kinetics and all that sort of thing, all other tools are a substitute for your intuition, right? So just keep that in mind. If in doubt, you can muscle test, right? But if you're in doubt, then usually your muscle testing will be offered as well, right? The reason why you're not clear is because you weren't fully aligned and connected, having done the offering, purification, and the gratefulness of the ritual of eating, yeah? So the offering is where you are in service to all beings in all worlds and all universes. The honoring is the fact that you're an instrument to all, and you're grateful for that experience in every moment, yeah? Someone just, I noticed last juicing and parasite cleanse that it affected me when writing 3 words later. I would notice I had combined 2 words. Yeah, so this is where the detoxification can be interfering with the different dimensions of the brain. Those are the material you know, the connection within and between the 6 brains. You got left, right, front, back, top and bottom, in and out. All toxicity is limiting or blocking or perverting or reversing the flow of information within those pathways. So this is where, when I do the brain exercise program, all of a sudden people will mistake B's and D's or P's and Q's because their pathways have to rewire themselves, right? So as you go through the process, sometimes the pathways have to reconfigure themselves. If you've been doing something on a compensatory pathway and you start to learn to do it on a natural pathway, sometimes you don't get it right the first time. Yeah, that's part of the building up and strengthening and coordinating. Once you strengthen and coordinate those pathways, that's when you get your spelling and things like that right. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
I'll just pop that in. I didn't make mention of it throughout the call, but when you were talking about Bonnie Basler's TED Talk, I found the link and posted that in there as well. So if anyone wants to watch that, they can scroll back and grab that link.
Yeah, I'd recommend that. I mean, there's lots of material on that topic, and there's so much stuff about microbiomes and fecal transplants and that sort of stuff, and it's all very interesting stuff, but it's all relative to the purity and the quality of the foods that you eat. And trying to be able to do it naturally without intervention is good. So
I'm just popping your link into the BitChute channel as well. So if anyone, this happens to be your first time here and you haven't heard any of the other calls and you're not up to date, all the previous calls are there on Brian's BitChute channel. So
sorry, I just saw a question there, Mark.
Yeah.
Somebody was just saying about amazing sharing. What's the name of the parasites that crave potatoes? It's nematode parasites primarily. They live on root vegetables. And does olive leaf work? Well, it does temporarily because, like I said, all the bugs work together. Olive leaf is a very broad spectrum tonic sort of thing that works on lots of all the fungus yeast molds, and it puts it all on the back foot. So it gives your body a chance to recover. You probably need stronger antiparasitic herbs to deal with the nematode parasites. And recurring migraines is primarily due to eating potatoes. A lot of people who are addicted to potatoes and eat too many potatoes are the ones with the migraines. So just keep that in mind. So it's funny, I always keep saying that, and there's the question right there. So those of you that have seen me talk about this multiple times or countless number of times in the past, there it is again. Potatoes and migraines is the link. And it goes back to the nematode parasites I showed before with the sections of the bowel. When you've got those parasites in the head area of the guts, you end up with migraines. Okay. So Kieran's just asking, I personally don't get cravings. Does that mean good guts, bugs? Yeah, primarily yes. But just because you don't have bad bugs doesn't mean you have enough good ones either. Yeah, remember you've got excesses and deficiencies. Just not having an excess of bad bugs doesn't mean you've got a deficiency of the good ones. Yeah. The vagus nerve info, didn't realize how much it has to do with emotions. Yeah, the vagus nerves, that's all part of the fear paralysis reflex, which is the number one neurological factor that I talk about. That's why doing all the conscious breathing is redirecting all the energy into the vagus nerve in a conscious way rather than a reactive emotional way. That's why people who do all the when they're frustrated, it's all the vagus nerve reaction going into the amygdala. Yeah. I don't really have any likes for Qigong. You know, I treated a martial artist the other day, and their breathing was absolutely horrible, terrible. And this is what I'm saying, like they could not breathe properly even when I was talking them through it. Until you master the breathing that I talk about, I don't recommend doing any of those arts. It just makes a process of becoming too much, Romeo. Just if you get the book, read the 12 factors of breathing, and get your head and heart around that before doing any exercise. Yeah. High risk, high reward technique. Yeah, it's very high risk. Yeah, you can freaking do your head in and inflate your ego out of this world. You don't want to go doing that. Yeah. Any thoughts on salt? Everything's appropriate when it's appropriate. You know, if you've got mineral imbalance, if you've got enough synergy within all the food groups, you know, again, if it's not processed salt, doesn't have the aluminium in it, if you get the Celtic salt, everything's appropriate when it's appropriate. Yeah.
Peter Herm has dropped in privately here that didn't come up in the group chat about how contagious are bugs from animals. Obviously, we wash our hands.
Oh, they're highly contagious, yeah. So it's not the viruses and so on, because they have to be sort of injected. Like that's why people, when they get bitten by dingoes, you know, like when I was out west, there was a dingo bite, and because they've got bugs in their saliva and that sort of stuff, their wounds are very hard to heal, a bit like galanas, that sort of thing. So yeah, they can be transferred, and they're often extremely difficult to treat. I'm just reading another question. Yeah, no, the idea of what I'm sharing is to completely reverse any and all regression. Somebody's just asking about, you know, falling into oblivion, which is the state of despair and everything like that within the aspects of being. What I'm sharing is to eliminate all suffering. You do not have to, you do not learn anything through suffering. You only learn what not to do, right? What never has worked, what isn't working, what will never work. This information is to inspire people into embracing the laws, dynamics, and processes of nature so they can stay in the flow and grow, right? All suffering is what Viktor Frankl says is needless. It's all needless suffering. It's just putting back what's missing is the ignorance and arrogance. Sorry, getting rid of the ignorance and arrogance according to what their relationship with nature is. Yeah. So yeah, the whole, you do not have to suffer at all, right? It's all about the lack of inspiration again, true inspiration. Coffee's man's nemesis. Someone's asking about coffee. I'd rather put a gun to your head than drink coffee. Seriously, I treated a good person with drinking coffee the other day, and caffeine and nicotine are the two drugs that work on the center of the brain that opens you up to subliminal frequencies and programs. So therefore, anybody who's drinking coffee or smoking cigarettes literally cannot think for themselves. So, you know, you see those spiders being given all the different drugs. Caffeine was the worst. It showed spiders spinning webs after being given drugs. Caffeine caused the most lack of the disintegration. Yeah. Coffee's man's nemesis. That's why it's in all these caffeinated drinks and chocolate and all these coffee shops. They know how destructive it is. It's the worst, one of the worst things on the planet, second to alcohol in terms of our diet. Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of things on the internet about having vegan cats and dogs. It's a matter of just giving them the right food and giving them the right microbiome and so on. Colonic irrigations are good, again, appropriate when it's appropriate. I was talking to somebody there the other week, and they were doing too many colonic irrigations. Again, it's too individual to say whether colonic irrigations can be used or not. You know, like some people, if they can't get into having 3 bowel motions a day, and if they've got enough energy and they've done enough eliminating and purifying, yes, you can send them off and get a colonic irrigation to help things along a bit. But again, there's too many variables to talk about. Taking carbon, again, it has to be offset with raw foods, right? This is where in homeopathics, carbon is, when you look at the mental, emotional effects of carbon, it can be quite destructive. If you offset that with enough raw energy, like I was saying, like carbon is the extreme opposite of fresh, organic, raw, whole foods. Yeah. So if you're having organic vegetable juices and so on, yes, you can take the carbon, but there's no freaking way you give carbon to somebody who's just come out of a meat diet and that sort of thing. Again, it can be done as a medicinal thing in an emergency, but not as a supplement. This is where you get into things like people taking the clay and that sort of stuff. It's all there's too many variables with it. You know, some people might take the diatomaceous earth on the first time. Someone might only take it on the second time. One time I came back from overseas and I had so many bugs in my gut that I couldn't even take Percy's powder, which is a sulfate combination. And it was going to be put me into too much of an elimination process too soon when my body hadn't recovered energy-wise. Yeah. So hopefully just answering those questions has highlighted the fact that it's all appropriate when it's appropriate, but you have to understand the state, the condition, the overall factors, like all the charts that are behind Mark and I, it explains all the things that we're actually dealing with. These are the things that you need to consciously address. And, you know, the more people that are reading the book more often, the more they say to me, it's actually really quite simple. It's just the whole picture. You start to know and understand everything that's going on, and you can factor it in, and you don't have to think about it. You just automatically know it. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's it for questions and comments. So we'll call that a wrap. Well, thank you again, Mark. Brilliant hosting as usual. And thank you everybody for attending and staying with us. We've still got, you know, quite a number of people on board. So hopefully that sort of enlightened everybody into a different way of thinking and approaching the whole topic. It's been doing my head in. Like I just want this video to be up so I don't have to talk about it again in clinic. I want everybody to watch and read all this before they come to the events and clinics, just so I don't have to spend the time dissecting it all and, you know, more or less doing a post-mortem on their past where they can think about all that themselves before they even come to see me. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mark. And have a good night here from Petals. She's already curled up and sleeping.
Beautiful. Very good. All right. Well, we'll wrap things up there. Definitely with the recording. Thanks everyone again for being here. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks again, Brian, for sharing all the wonderful material. And we'll catch everyone for the next one. Stay tuned.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.